How you doing, guys? Heading to work right now, but I was thinking about something. I just want to put these thoughts out there while I'm driving. So, yesterday, I was listening to someone talking about Israel being blinded in part. And I've heard this teaching for a while that people that are descendants of Israel somehow today are blinded in part. And I want to say this teaching is completely wrong. And on the way they are trying to explain it. They're trying to say it is harder for someone of like genetic ancestral line that basically they had somebody that came from the nation of Israel. It is harder for them to be saved today. This is completely false and this is completely wrong and heretical. When you go back and look at these verses where it talks about Israel being blinded in part, that blinding in part, first of all, was talking about that last generation, those last living people of Israel during that time period. So, for example, I don't have the verses in front of me, but I can remember where it talks about the election, the remnant. God reserved unto himself a 7,000 men that had not bowed the knee to Baal. This is talking about those people during that time period. If you look at the verse, it says, even at this present time. You know, those key words. Present time there is talking about at that present time when Paul was speaking, those 7,000 men have been reserved unto God. But this whole blinded in part, nation of Israel blinded in part and things like this, if you go to another one, it says, I'll get you another verse, it says, the rest were blinded. Again, I'll have to post these verses so you can understand what I'm saying. I know I'm just kind of saying just phrases right now or verses just out of order. But what I'm trying to get you to see is, in today's time period, no one on earth is of Israel today. No one on earth right now is blinded in part. I know this is very difficult for many to understand, but none of us are blinded in part. The only ones that were blinded in part was that last generation of Israel. They were the ones that were blinded in part. Those people. After the stoning of Stephen, after all that commenced, after that happened, following the nation of Israel falling, they diminished. The little flock. I said that incorrectly. The little flock diminished. Well, the point is, yes, the nation of Israel, that living last generation of the nation of Israel, the ones that were casted out of Israel, they were the ones that were blinded. And then what happened, there was only, a small amount of people, a remnant of people that actually believed God. But the rest were blinded. That is not something that is still happening today. I see people preach this and they preach it as if it is still happening today. That is completely wrong. That's not happening today at all. So today, you must understand you are not of the nation of Israel. No matter how much you want to try and say you are not of God's nation of Israel. The only thing that is Israel today is the land. There are no people connected to the nation of Israel today. There are no nation of Israel people. There are no chosen people today. This is something that people struggle on. I have Hebrew roots people that contact me. I just had a guy contact me yesterday trying to plead with me that I'm part of the nation of Israel. I'm like, no, I'm not. I was born in America. I'm a Gentile. Not anymore. But the point is, I was born a Gentile. Now, once you get saved, you're part of you become part of the body of Christ. But I was never, ever a part of the nation of Israel. And the guy tried to use my skin color to try to say that. I'm like, no. There is no one on earth today that is part of the nation of Israel. It's just common sense. If you're born in America, what does that make you? American? He tried to say, no, brother, that makes you part of the nation of Israel. It's the most asinine thing I've ever heard. No, if I'm born in America, that will make me American. That's what it would make me. And according to the Bible, that would also make you a Gentile if you're born in other nations other than the nation of Israel. Now, even those that are living on the land in the nation of Israel today, they are not part of the nation of Israel because they are not God's nation of Israel. He ended that. He put that on pause. He said he would not be their God. He is not. I told you, he put that last generation, he gave them eyes in which they would slumber. God made that last generation of the nation of Israel, the living ones, surviving ones, whatever. Yes, it will be hard for them to understand, and they were the ones that were blinded in part. So I'm just trying to say, this is a short video. I'm going to do a whiteboard video on this today. Later on today is some time to talk about this blinded in part. Because a lot of people have this misunderstood. They actually think people today calling themselves Jews somehow supernaturally God has made it to where it is harder for them to understand. Now I want you to think about how messed up that sounds. Think about this. So God would make the children, just descendants, if you want to say that, descendants of those that belong. So let's say this. Let's say deep down in my genetic lineage, somebody was a part of the nation of Israel. So because somebody in my genetic lineage was part of the nation of Israel, God is making it today hard for me to be saved. That is what people are saying. Do you see how sick this sounds? Which is incorrect. Or they'll say, okay, well, you're lucky, Brandon. You're just part of that small amount of people God wants to be saved or something like that. This is the type of videos I've heard on this topic of blinded in part. No, that is incorrect. No one today is blinded in part. No one. You are not those group of people that God blinded. Now some people say, well, it says blinded until the fullness of the Gentiles. Okay, yes, but we still aren't those people that are blinded, no matter how you want to look at it. Now we can debate over what this fullness of the Gentiles means, but this blinded in part thing, that's still not talking about any of us today. Okay, who was blinded? I just explained it. Those last surviving people that came from the nation of Israel. Once they were scattered out of the nation of Israel, those people, that generation, they were the ones that were blinded in part. Not all of them. Okay, moving forward, you cannot cast that same blindness onto their children. Meaning, if you had someone that was scattered out of the nation of Israel, he's a stranger in another country, he meets a Roman woman, he has a child with her. People are actually saying that, well, his child, that nation of Israel guy that's been casted out, but he's not part of a nation of Israel no more. If he has kids with a Roman woman, then his kids, it's going to be hard for them to believe. No, that's completely wrong. No, first of all, his kids will be Gentiles. Next, that blindness does not extend unto his children. That blindness in part was only for him, because he was of the nation of Israel, but now that nation of Israel is no more, it is only for him. And then, like I said, not everybody was blinded. There was a remnant of people that were not blinded. So I've heard so many explain this, and they tried to extend that blindness out even into our time period right now, when it does not extend. There are no Jews today, like I'm talking about Hebrew Israelite Jews, that are blinded. because there are no Hebrew Israelite Jews whatsoever. So there's no one today. Are there blind people today? Are there people that it's hard for them to be saved? Yes, but not by God's hand. God has not made them blinded. He's not made anyone today blinded to the truth. Everyone can see the truth today. It is themselves that are blinding. They're blinding themselves. Everyone today. You got people. Let me just say this. I'm gonna use a color. It doesn't matter. But you have white people that it's hard for them to believe. There's black people that it's hard for them to believe. So this whole thing, when I hear Hebrews talk about colors, the color doesn't matter. You have people of various colors that it's still hard for them to believe the Bible. Are you really going to insist, okay, well, that just proves they are a descendant of the nation of Israel? Because I heard somebody say that. No, that is not true at all. The last ones, the ones that were blinded, was that surviving last generation of nation of Israel. The ones that were scattered out of the nation of Israel, they were the ones that blinded. Once they had children, they had children, like I said, with a guy, a nation of Israel guy that just got cast out. He goes to Rome, has children with a Roman woman. His child is not blinded. It will not be difficult for his child to believe the gospel. It's just completely sick and heretical to even say that. Everyone today has the choice to believe the gospel. 1 Corinthians 15 verses 1 through 4. You have the choice to believe. God is not making it hard for you to believe. So I'm just getting tired of hearing this erroneously wrong, heretical teaching that if you have ancestral DNA, whatever, from the nation of Israel, God is making it hard for you to believe. No, that's completely wrong. But again, I will do a video on this later on today. I hope what I've said today will open some people's eyes to understand that this blindness in part is not talking about people right now. The only ones that were blind, again, was that last surviving generation of the nation of Israel that was casted out of the nation of Israel. Those people, they were alive when they were scattered out of their land. They were the ones that were blinded in part. So again, you can't extend that blindness onto surviving, just because you come from those families. No, that's completely false. Everyone today has a choice to believe or not. And I've had people say, well, I just don't agree with you on this. That's fine. But I just want you to know, you're basically saying God is supernaturally making it harder for a group of people today to believe the gospel. Isn't it God's free will that he wants all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth? So how does it make any sense that, okay, he's making it hard for people to believe, a certain group of people today, yet it's still his will that all men be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth? That doesn't make any sense. So people don't even understand God's will for today. They don't understand dispensations for today. At one point in time, yes, God said, hey, I'm going to literally do this to those last surviving people of the nation of Israel. Yes, I'm going to give them eyes that slumber. I'm going to make it hard for them to believe that, because they rejected. It's because they themselves rejected. God didn't just do it to them initially. That's what people are incorrectly saying. You're literally saying God is doing this to people that have never even got a chance to believe. Think about that. Think about this, people. You're saying, for those that support this erroneous heretical doctrine, you're saying God is taking descendants of those that were, if you want to look at a genetic line, genealogy, they had somebody that was part of the nation of Israel. You're saying God is just going to initially cause those people, even today in 2021, to not be able to believe the Bible, to make it hard for them to be saved. That is sick, man. That don't even make any sense. So I want you to understand that this is not what you think it is. This is not God supernaturally today making a group of people on the earth it's harder for them to believe. No, that is sick. That's some Robert Breaker, Renee Roland bull crap. No. So I really will be going deeper into this heretical doctrine later on, coming up today, and probably do a couple series on this, because no one today is blinded in part. None of us are. All right, guys, have a great day.